Welcome to the Leedz Edutainment Podcast, featuring in-depth interviews with people in hip-hop culture, based out of New England. Leeds.
How's it going?
How we doing, brother? Bad hair day or what we got over there?
No, it's kind of like it's up and then there we go. Cool, better.
I'd like to welcome everybody to the Leedz Edutainment Podcast. Like us on YouTube, give us an engagement, smash that like button, whatever you got to do. Follow us on Spotify. We got a very special guest today, a man that wears many hats, Mr. Tim Hall, musician, poet, producer, creative entrepreneur, and professor.
Yes, sir.
You think you got room for one more title, or what do we got?
No, the connector. I like being a connector. I like being somebody that can support and figure things out.
Oh yeah, you figure it out, all right. Have you got the answer yet? Because I'm still trying to figure it out.
Oh no, that's the journey. That's the journey, trying to figure this thing out every day.
Feel that. You currently live in Boston, but I was reading your bio. You're originally from Detroit.
Yes. Yeah, I moved to Boston in 2013. Actually from Iowa. I was in graduate school at Iowa State. And I jumped around the Midwest before moving here. Grew up in Detroit, went to an arts high school, did everything music and performing, from the plays and musicals to symphony band to jazz band to marching band, step team, all of the things that I could perform in, I was doing. And was also really big into sports, so I played a lot of golf and baseball. And by the time I got to college, I didn't get into a HBCU. I wanted to go to a historically Black university to play in a marching band, and I didn't get into one. And the one that I got into, I didn't get enough scholarship money. So I went to Bowling Green State University in Ohio, and didn't really care for their music program. They had a really cool sport management program. So I studied sport management and entrepreneurship, and worked for the Professional Golf Association for years. I was a big golfer. And music was like this thing that I also loved to do. I was playing and gigging all throughout high school and undergrad around the city. And music just kind of kept being this thing I did on the side as I figured out, working for the Professional Golf Association, doing all of that. That took me out to Minneapolis my senior year after I graduated, and I was working for the 2009 PGA Championship out there, and got really connected to the music scene while I was living there. And I was burnt out with music, and then I moved down to Iowa City to work for my fraternity because there was an opening at our national office. I joined an organization. I'm a member of Sigma Lambda Beta International Fraternity, which is a Latino-based multicultural organization. And I worked in Iowa City, got connected to the music scene easily and surprisingly, because I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And grad school after that at Iowa State, was doing music, gigging consistently. I was a part of a band. We were the touring band for the Nappy Roots. So I got a chance to play for them in Iowa. And my professor knew someone who worked at Berklee, and I applied and got it. And I moved here in 2013.
Wow.
That's my world. That's my world spiel.
You hit on a lot of things I have to ask you about. Like, first of all, golf. Who picks up golf in Detroit? Is that anyone picking up golf in Detroit? How did that happen?
Exactly. So surprisingly, Michigan has the most golf courses per square foot, like the state with the most golf courses in the US, with it's wild. There's golf everywhere. And my dad is big into golf. I got into it because of him. For the longest, I didn't realize it was just like a white sport because there's that many Black people that play golf in Michigan. Like Michigan, There's a huge golf population and a lot of Black people. There's youth programs for golf for Black kids. There's scholarships. I could have gone to school on a scholarship for being a caddy. I was a caddy at a very well-known golf course, Oakland Hills Country Club, which is housed the Ryder Cup, which is the biggest U.S. tournament, you know, for professional golf between the U.S. and Europe. And I got a chance to caddy at like that club, which was wild. And then returned when I worked for the PGA. So I went from like being a caddy to then returning like, yo, I work for the PGA and I'm back on my old stomping grounds. I got a chance to work there in 08.
Wow. You should have let George Carlin know, because his whole bit was he used to make fun of golf. He's like, it's the most elite, like rich, bougie sport in the world. Just a bunch of land that only rich people can use. He's like, it's just such a waste of land. You've changed my perspective on golf.
Yeah, it's one of those golf. Golf is one of those sports for me that I think it's something about it being both a team and a solo sport. Like, I'm responsible for my game and my game only. However, me playing well allows my team to do better. So I both have to like be responsible for me holding it together mentally, physically, emotionally, and being responsible for doing well enough to help bring my team's score down overall. And like team sports were always a bit difficult for me. Like I started off my first like communal sport was football. Oh. And I got confused by the plays. I didn't really understand it, and I didn't like physical contact as a kid. I got into basketball, but it was mainly like street ball. I didn't really understand like formations for basketball. I never played organized basketball. It was always just street hoops and one-on-one. So I think golf was something that I can do with my dad. I thought it was really interesting and cool. I was already into baseball, so the mechanics were very similar. And then there's just something about like I grew up in the Tiger Woods era. Like I grew up like studying Tiger Woods. I had the book, all of the video, like all of it. So I think I was also like, it's like folks who grew up in the Michael Jordan era. Like he just kind of was that figure that got you into it, that made you enthusiastic about it, that made you study it. It was a different thing for me.
Right. What you were doing music. What were you playing or participating in at that point as a musician?
So I started playing saxophone in fourth grade. And you know, I have my poem Dad Did about it, where it was my music teacher. She asked me what instrument I wanted to play, and I originally wanted to play drums. And by the time they got to me alphabetically, all the people like took up the drum slots. So I just sat there thinking like, oh, my dad really likes jazz. I grew up in a house listening to smooth jazz, and so forth. And I said saxophone, and that's kind of like what drew me is growing up in a household where my dad was playing music regularly. My mother, you know, sang all the time. So everybody in some point has touched an instrument or done something musically in my family. And I'm one who just kind of like took it to the professional route.
Why the saxophone? I know that you picked it. Was there any other specific reason why you chose the saxophone?
I listened. My dad listened to a lot of Kirk Whalum, Dave Koz, John Coltrane. I just like grew up listening to these individuals, Kenny G, Michael Brecker. Like,
glad you brought up Kenny G.
Yeah, like it smooth jazz in Detroit is like it is its own culture in Detroit. So like there's a lot of live concerts, there's a lot of festivals, there's a lot of opportunities that my dad would make sure that I got to experience with him. He worked in construction. He works in construction and has been a part of the city of Detroit's infrastructure of building a lot of major spaces, a lot of the sports venues. So my mom went into labor while my dad was working on the Palace of Auburn Hills. He's done Tiger Stadium, Comerica Park, Ford Field, Cobo Hall. Like he's been in and around, so he would get special invitations to Kenny G's performing here, and he'd make sure that I was with them, and different things like that.
My stepfather's in construction too. He works for a general
Okay.
contractor. He's a supervisor. He does project management, all that stuff too. So I relate to
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Kenny G is funny story. I saw a documentary on Kenny G. He was just a street playing saxophone player. Like but his personality, he had a lot of charisma. And I grew up in the Kenny G era. When he was really popular in the 90s. And it was just, he had so much charisma, and everyone thought it was just this crazy idea to just have a saxophone album, right? With this guy and with this crazy hair and
right. And soprano saxophone.
It was a huge platinum album. Kenny G was like a household name. That's how big he got.
I forget where I was. I think I was at Turtle Swamp Brewing, and they had like a Kenny G board game. at the bros, like he had a board game.
That's how big he was.
That's
exactly how big he was.
That's
it was like the 90s, like it was like the 90s cocktail hour music. Like before social media, you go to a cocktail party and Kenny G be playing in the background. You know what I mean? Like that type of music was big back then. You know what I mean? The saxophone also has a crazy history of despair too. And I was watching a documentary the other day where it's like a lot of musicians who picked up the saxophone suffered terribly. Like Charlie Parker.
I didn't know that.
Well, you familiar with Charlie Parker, the era?
Yeah.
Charlie Parker, the virtuoso that he was, suffered from drug addiction. So then like a lot of people,
Coltrane did, and
it all stemmed, and it was that whole generation like that played the sax really went down hard. And
that was a tough time. Even the guy also just like in society too, like that kind of like amplified a lot of that.
Yeah, the jazz era, the beginning of jazz. And the guy that made the saxophone, actually, Adolph Sax, actually lived a very cursed life as well, making that thing, making the saxophone.
I didn't realize that either.
Yeah, because he struggled, with people trying to steal the patent, and then he had all these health issues, and he was fighting to get it into a symphony, and
it didn't no idea.
The saxophone.
No idea.
My grandfather was a drummer, jazz era. And in his life, he decided he wanted to play the saxophone. Like in his 70s, he decided he was going to pick up the sax. He was playing one night and he set off his lifeline, and then EMS came running to the place to see what was going on, make sure he was all right. It was just because he was playing the sax. So the saxophone's got a crazy.
Picking up an instrument?
I was a DJ.
Gotcha.
So that was my instrument, and then when I applied to Berklee, they said, turntablism isn't an instrument.
What?
Get out of here at that time. So I had to go to Northeastern. Wow. But I wanted to do the business side anyway. I felt like I had more to offer there.
For sure.
But back to you, man. So you played the sax. Last time you're also a poet. For some reason I remember you telling me the poetry was first.
No, the saxophone was first. It was
okay.
The saxophone was definitely first. I didn't get into poetry until college. Thankfully I had a really dope music program at my high school, Southfield Lathrop, which is no longer exists, but I got into the music program my sophomore year. When most folks, it was like you got in for your senior year. And thankfully I got exposed to music production. So I had a whole music production class in high school where my first DAW was Cakewalk. I was playing on rolling MIDI controllers and learning how to make music. And just the music scene in Boston, or in Detroit rather, is all encompassing. It's a part of the fabric of the community, with Motown, with rock music, with house music. Like it's so important to the people and to the community that there was so many opportunities for me as a young person to get involved in the music scene. So I started gigging in high school. We were playing in our jazz band at different venues and whatnot restaurants and so forth, festivals. I had a lot of older cats that kind of looked out for us, and they would make sure that we were at the bar with them at the gig and seeing how they do business, or at the festival backstage, listening, observing, and to the point where they would book us with them, or they'd say like, yo, we got an opening slot for you at the festival. You all should do it. So we had our own band. By my junior year of high school, we had a music studio. My best friend, Dustin, back home, him, myself, other homies, Eldred, Khalid Douglas, all cats that are incredible musicians. We like cleaned out Dustin's mother's, the basement of his mother's daycare center. We cleaned out the basement. We we open up one of these doors and we see this dust. It's like this, it felt like the Goonies or something. Like we open up this door, it's like dusty, there's shit everywhere. And there's this thing on the top of the table, and the window, the light is just like shining on top of it. We go over, we like blow the dust off, and we lift this cover, and it's a Rhodes piano. We're like, yo, there's a Rhodes down here. And we like cleaned out the whole basement and built our own music studio in high school. So by my senior year, you know, we are well known. We have folks coming through to the studio. We're performing, we're collaborating, producing music with people. I grew up, you know, in the era of like Big Sean. Big Sean was like huge. My best Dustin, he's produced for his third mixtape. And we came, you know, Tierra Marie, as well. And a bunch of other artists at that time, and it was everything. But college was different. I had moved from Detroit to Ohio. There was a lot for me going to Bowling Green State University. I was familiar with it. My sister went there, so when she graduated, I was starting my freshman year. And she had been bringing me down there throughout high school. My first college party was my freshman year of high school, and she would bring me down every year. And so by the time I got to Bowling Green, I felt like I knew people. You know, a lot of her friends were like my big brothers. A lot of them were in fraternities, which was also one of the reasons why I wanted to go to college, was to join the fraternity. And I was learning about myself in a different way, about my own Black identity, what it meant to be a Black man, being exposed to a lot of different cultures, identities, experiences, backgrounds, people from around the world. And it was dope, I think, to see other Black students be expressive about themselves. And I think that's when I started to journal. And then my journaling started to, you know, turn into rhyming, and then rhyming, I was like, oh, this is cool. And I've always loved being a performer. So I think once they were like open mic opportunity and I didn't have my saxophone, I was like, well, I'll read a poem that I have. And that was what really got me into performing, was just like, I think the love of performing itself, and, you know, reflecting, having time to like learn about myself and write it down.
So you went straight to spoken word poetry first, right? Was there any like, I want to be a rapper? I mean, it's normally like
no, it was like,
like,
it was always about being a musician, being producing music, and then poetry. Poetry just felt, I mean, singing was always something that I did, like background vocals or stuff like that. I've always loved that, but I think rapping for me never felt authentic. It never felt like something that I was drawn to in the same way as like spoken word or playing music.
Yeah, let's go backtrack to Detroit. Detroit hip hop scene, it's great. Love the Detroit hip hop scene, especially now. I mean, you know, obviously you have like Eminem, you have Royce the 5'9", with like the two big ones originally, right? And then you had, and then let's not forget us Insane Clown Posse, which I'm sure you were listening to a lot of as a kid.
Not at all.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Actually, it was a joke. But recently, you know, you have Paulo Brown, Black Milk. I think
Yeah, a couple
Odyssey
Black Milk records.
Is Odyssey from Detroit? I believe Odyssey.
I don't think Odyssey is from
Slum Village. Dilla,
Slum
right?
Village, Dilla, yes.
Right.
Big Sean.
Big Sean. There's a bunch more.
Yeah.
Good scene.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things where like it's dope going back home, because my homies are a part of that. They are part of the very current Detroit hip hop scene, producing music, Grammy nominated, producers and artists and collectives, and they are a part of the fabric of the current Detroit sound. They're elevating the city. They're elevating artists' voices there. And it's dope to go back home because I'm so checked out being here, and being so, present and involved in the scene here. It's kind of like going back home. It feels a little bit foreign, and it's dope to be exposed to newer artists, especially knowing that, my best friends are connected to building that and creating that.
Spoken word poetry is the basis of hip hop. Rap is a derivative of spoken word poetry, right? So I read somewhere, I don't know if this is right, like rap stands for rhythm in poems. I don't know if that's
I've
true.
Never heard that.
I read that somewhere. I was like, that could be true. Is that how it came?
Right, exactly. It sounds like it. It sounds like it. It makes sense.
Were you inspired by like the last poets and Gil Scott Heron and the stuff that came out of the '60s that kind of set the tone? Did that make you wanna? Because socially, the context of what they were speaking and poetry about was kind of what
it was. I grew up in the Def Poetry Jams era. Like that was my intro.
Slam style.
Yeah.
So like Saul Williams.
Yep, Saul Williams. Particularly Asia Sampson was this poet that I heard. He talked about his experience with cancer. And I remember watching this poem on YouTube and just being like, wow, this dude is so vulnerable. Like this dude is telling such a challenging experience and does it in one of the flyest ways. Like what? I think I was just like in awe of it. And I think I was engaged by like the ability to tell such a challenging story in such an engaging way that used both humor, seriousness, and swagger. And I was just like, yo, that is the flyest thing to me. Like that was what I think that for me is like when people hear, Jay-Z, Reasonable Doubt, and be like, yo, I'm about to spit now. Like that's what, and Jay-Z Reasonable Doubt, that's my favorite. That was my album that I think made me love hip hop.
Classic.
And yeah, like I think watching Asia Sampson and then just like completely diving into Def Poetry Jam. That's what really got me into spitting.
Yeah, because you're quoted saying your poetry draws inspiration from lived experiences, to charting the nuances of Blackness, masculinity, and the beauties of life. Mm-hmm. You want to elaborate on that more?
Yeah, I think for me, I've had such a beautiful and privileged life. I've had in comparison, I've had, little things to overcome and navigate. And I feel like I have this unique ability to take an experience or a moment and expand on it. For me, I didn't really jump into poetry through the literary route where I'm like reading the works of the greats, because I think for me, language needed to be accessible, and oftentimes it felt like reading some of the greats' works felt just confusing. Like I had to think too hard to understand what they're saying or why they're saying it. And I think for me, I've always looked at how do I take this complex life thing and translate it in a way that is meaningful or that can be authentic or can be human to individuals, so that they can relate in a way. And for me, is most of my poetry is from personal narrative or personal experience. And I think I'm learning what it's like to also write from imagination or write from another point of view that I might not necessarily or personally have a connection to.
Well, you also, I've heard some of your stuff, you also confront social issues.
Yep.
Which is
Absolutely.
the basis of spoken word and rap. It was derived from confronting social issues in the 60s at the time. Yeah. So you are kind of carrying on that tradition.
Absolutely. It's the, writers, artists, musicians are the journalists of our lifetime. Like people, we're making things in real time because we are experiencing them in real time. And I think slam definitely helped draw that out a little more. It definitely challenged me to be a little more observant, to be to have a magnifying glass to the world around me, and to challenge things and to question things a little more, and to do that in a way that is connected to this art form that's expressive, and community driven. I mean, I got into slam because I walked into the Lizard Lounge in Cambridge because I heard that there was a poetry night on Sundays, and Lizard Lounge was my first venue aside from Wally's where I really got exposed to poetry and got connected to this community. Wally's was the first venue I went to, and then in music that was dope, connected with some folks. But I think it was when it was Lizard Lounge where I made my first friends, like my friends that I hadn't, that didn't work with me or weren't a part of my fraternity. It was like, I really got a chance to connect with other people, other artists like myself, and just be encouraged to come back, be encouraged to share my work, be encouraged to perform, to the point where, that led me into competing and trying to make teams and so forth and so forth.
Yeah. So,
and really when I moved to Boston, I was gonna say, I didn't really play music. I didn't play my saxophone for the first couple of years. It was mainly poetry because I felt actually a little more intimidated being a musician here than I did as a poet.
Oh, so you actually competed in slams contests?
Yeah.
Talk if people don't know, talk about what that is and what that process is like.
Yeah, for sure. So slam was created in Chicago in the bar scene. It was a game that was created to get people to come to bars when folks weren't coming out to bars. Right.
Aren't we all just trying to get people to come out to bars? Isn't that what we do as musicians and promoters?
Exactly.
That's job detail, getting people to come out to bars and drink alcohol. That's the behind every music business live event. That's the detail they don't tell you.
Yeah, I forget the minute details, I forget the dude's name. There's a tradition of people in poetry, slam poetry, where you say the person's name, the dude's name, and everyone says "so what," because it wasn't about him. It was about the community. So it was the idea that individuals would compete. There's about 8 to 10 people that compete, and then you would find 5 random folks that just are there at the bar or in the audience to say yo, would you be a judge? And that the purpose of that was to bring some equality, to bring some equality to the judging. If we're only having judges who are I'm a poet, then the judging of it, the person is very biased. We just wanted whoever was there so that you could have somebody who had never heard a poem before read in their life, and they're giving you their honest opinion on how that poem or that piece made you feel. Now it's it's a whole competition thing. So you get five judges, you have 5 scores, people perform, you get 3 minutes, 10 seconds to perform. You can't use any props or music or anything. It's just you and the microphone and the audience. And you drop the high score, you drop the low score, you add up the middle, and then you kind of go in order. You drop 4 people, then you have 4 more people performing. You drop 2 people, then you have the final 2, and those two, compete to be the winner. And you usually get a prize. At Lizard Lounge, you get $100. You get, $70 cash and then $30 towards food and drink. And that's, you compete, and then they have like regional competition. So you're competing against other venues. There used to be a national poetry competition, National Poetry Slam, and you compete nationally. And you have Boston has a rich and deep history. A Black woman brought slam poetry here to Boston, and individuals like Oompa, Portia O, Janae Johnson are all national award-winning, international award-winning poets.
Yeah, I think the Middle East. When I was at the Middle East, I think they held a poetry slam competition there as well. I forget what year it was, but there was a big one there.
Yeah. Multiple teams in Boston have won first place and competed at a national level.
What does it take to be a good slam poet? Because I know there's a way you have to deliver the words, and maybe there's some body expression. It's more than just reading your poetry, right? Like there's more to it.
I think, and it's like good is relative. I think it's that you found a way of communicating your story that's most authentic to you, and that fits within the parameters. 3 minutes with an additional 10 seconds. So that's big, because if you go longer than that, points get marked off, So I think being respectful to like, these are the parameters. In order for me to compete well, I should be respectful to the parameters that have been set within this, format. So, and that I think is challenging. People have their perspectives on, slam versus just spoken word and so forth. But, if you're trying to compete and do well in the sport, in the art form, it is, sticking to the parameters, communicating your piece in a way that's the most authentic to you, or that you feel is the most effective for the piece, and doing your best to manage, like, some people may do and say things that are purely for the shock, or might even trigger for purposes of like effect. And I think that individuals have their own perspectives on how people use certain experiences for competitive edge versus like, did you really need to go that far or get that like shocking or something like that. So, I think that there's some strategy for sure that you have to be mindful of. Knowing your audience is huge. I think, you might use certain pieces if you are observing the audience responding or reacting to certain types of poems and so forth. So, I think if you're trying to do well, you are thinking about strategy. You're thinking about, who's you're competing against, because we get to the point where it's like, I know rappers know people other rappers' bars. It's like, if you go I know that Oompa knows some of Mo's bars, Mo knows some of Cliff bars, Cliff knows some of so and so's bars. Like, you know who you're competing against if you're in it for a while. And so I think that's the fun competitive part, especially if because we're all playful and we're all like iron sharpening iron, much like I think lyricists do. So poets who are competing on a regular basis, we are saying like, hey, don't go easy on me, like, bring it. And I think that's the cool part of the art form as well, is that you kind of have this camaraderie, because we're all having fun. I love being at a slam and being able to recite a poet's lyrics right with them while they're competing it, just because I love the bar that they just spit and whatnot. So yeah, that's great.
I want to talk about you joining the Steel Gold Band, since you mentioned Mo, because I mean, obviously, we had a great. You guys just had a great festival last Saturday. Apparently we shop at the same place.
Exactly.
We're wearing the same shirt from the same festival.
If you want one, we still got them. Come and holla.
Where can they find them? Is the Still Gold website, or is that on the Tip Hall?
Yeah, the Still Gold, they'll be coming soon on our online shop on stillgold.com. So we'll be announcing once they're all uploaded and ready to go.
Word, what an event. What an event.
Thank you.
I gotta say, I've seen you guys live many times, and I've seen many performances in many different spots, and I think that was my favorite. And I think it was just the vibe of the day mixed with being outside, incredible sound. They really got it right with you guys. I've seen sound guys struggle with you guys because you guys have a lot going on. You know, you got sax, you got live drums, you got Ark on the keyboard, guitar, 2 MCs. You know, it's like, you know, and that's tough to manage, you know. So you can easily, in a club, sound can get drowned out. You can drown out one thing, you know, it's tough to do. But those guys Saturday, they got it. And the energy was there. But I want to go backtrack. How did you join the group? How did you even get involved? That group has started out with 2 people. It is now 5. And I think there might have been even more at different times too. There was people that came and gone too. But how did you get involved?
So I got involved because Cliff used to intern for Art back in the day.
Cliff Notes.
Me and Cliff, Cliff Notes. Cliff Notes used to intern for Art. Me and Cliff, run Hipstery. And I first met Art at I think it was 2016 Boston Music Awards. And I was like, Cliff introduced me and we were just standing there. And when I met him, they were just about to announce the Producer of the Year award, and we were standing next to him. They announced his name, and that was when I first met Ark, and I had just been around him. And I'm playing and gigging and performing with different folks. And one day they just asked me to be a part of one of their shows. They're like, "Yo, do you want to play in the band?" It was the Oberon show for the album release of Torch Song. No, of New Normal. It was the album release of New Normal. And I remember that year was 2019, and that was also the year that they played at Boston Calling. Or was that 2018 Boston Calling? One of those years. I remember being at Boston Calling like a fanboy, just screaming. And I was a big fan, and I was around, and they invited me actually to the one of the recording sessions, because now that I'm a part of the band, I kind of understand the process. There's this point at which, majority of the music is done. We're starting to invite featured artists and guest artists and so forth. So I got invited to the bridge. I think who else was there? Ed Balloon was there, Fran P, a bunch of other folks. Got to meet up all these folks, played on some things. None of that I played on at that session ended up making it to the New Normal. But I got invited to play the album release show at the Oberon, and things are kind of going and going and going. And this is, I think, late 2019, where they're like, "Yo, we'd like to officially invite you to be a member. We really like what you do. We like your energy, your vibe. We feel like you'll be a good addition to what we're doing." And yeah, going into 2020, then the pandemic happened. But
join the group. No shows for 2 years. Great.
Yeah. So now it's been about 3.5 years that I've been a member.
Word. Talk about the festival and how that all came apart. Were you involved heavily in I know Mo, I read the article in the Globe. It was Mo kind of sparked it, but I'm sure that you had a big role in that. How did it all happen?
No, it was literally Mo. We were all, we had just released Rock Boyega, and just processing everything that we had gone through from the pandemic, and we're starting to, thaw out and come back out of the shadows a bit. And, we had the album release, and we were just, I think reflecting on what are some other things that we can do? What else is it that we want we always, I think about what our next big move is. And the guys that I think had always talked about doing a festival before. So Mo approached the city of Boston, and I think it was around February or so, about collaborating on something. I don't think he knew that the city of Boston had an initiative to activate the new renovated City Hall Plaza. So he just reached out, they scheduled a meeting, and it was like, yo, a festival will be really cool. They said like, hey, here's the opportunity. This is what we're trying to do. The city of Boston was trying to is activating the City Hall Plaza area. Mo brought that back to the team, like, yo, City Hall is doing this. What do y'all think? I think we should do a festival. And it went from there. Billy Dean. So Billy Dean's role has been extremely crucial. Knowing that Kara, the chief, is already beyond invested into the arts and culture community, has advocated for us throughout her entire time there, and having also Billy Dean and Samantha Hale, Tom, and everyone over there at the mayor's office of arts and culture, they were like, yes, let's do this. Let's make this as big as we can make it. And for us, we were like, yo, we were concerned. Ark and I were like, dude, Mo, do you think we can, like, this is a lot. And for me, having experience with BAMS Fest and being a part of the beginnings of BAMS Festival, from that to hipstery with Boston Answering and so forth. Once I heard that there was the possibility of doing this, I was like, well, I got the experience. Let's do this. And thankfully, this is typically, a role that Ark would be spearing. And he's navigating fatherhood and all those things. So I think it was a perfect opportunity for me to also contribute this skill of mine with the group for the first time, beyond just, playing saxophone and making music.
Yeah, you did a great job, brother. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And shout out Val B, right? She helped promote the event too.
So Val, we hired Val as our event producer, having again some of the knowledge and wisdom from prior events that I've been a part of. This would not have been doable or feasible just on our own. Like, I've done the, like, stressing myself out and being responsible for every single little detail of a major event. And I've learned over the years that, like, delegating and hiring the right individuals who are already experts at the thing, rather than you learning in the process of creating it, is so much worth it, that thankfully we had a budget that we could hire somebody like Val to be our event producer. So Val managed all the logistics and production, the permitting, working hand in hand with the city of Boston to make sure things are running smoothly, artist management, vendor management, marketing and promo. It was a true collaborative effort between the mayor's office, Billy Dean being the spearhead for their team, Val, and Mo and myself.
Great job. Great teamwork on that one. Because there's a lot of hoops that people that don't know, there's a lot of hoops to jump through when you're doing something with the city.
Absolutely.
And, it's not, there's a lot of patience, a lot of deep breaths, and a lot of praying. So
a lot of challenges, and you take it week by week, and you do your best to stay on top of things. And it also is a short period. We didn't really get started with the actual planning until maybe June, May, June. Yeah. And that is not a lot of time to plan a major festival. And we pulled it off, thankfully. And, we're very proud of what we were able to accomplish this year. We absolutely, like the individuals we are, are making our lists of things that need to get improved. That was happening throughout Sunday or throughout Saturday. So we absolutely have the things that we want to strengthen and improve about systems and communication and logistics and processes and all those things. But at the end of the day, we did something incredible. We did something magical. Yeah.
Great event. You also mentioned BAMS Fest. Are you not part of BAMS Fest anymore?
Not as an official team member. I joined and I met Kat in 2015.
For those who don't know Kat, can you give her
yes, absolutely. Catherine Morris.
Give her flowers.
Absolutely. Catherine Morris is the founder and artistic director of BAMS Festival, which is Boston Art, Music, and Soul Festival, a 501c3 organization dedicated to bridging the gaps between culture, arts in the city of Boston for people of color. And she founded that in 2014, 2015. And I joined, I met her through a mentor of mine, Tamia Jordan. And because of my experience with the PGA, so my undergrad major actually prepared me for a lot of this because I was doing
hold on.
Yeah.
Oh, so your undergraduate was golf management?
Yeah,
that has prepared you for the music business. I love that.
Yeah,
it's to revisit that.
Exactly. It prepared me for event ops because that's what I did. I was responsible for like setting up the golf course for the major tournament. All of my work was on national and international TV. I like would wake up the next day and be like, holy crap, people are watching, like the camera is on that flower bed that I just spent 3 months like planting all those flowers to make it look fucking good. Hell yeah. Like I was so hyped.
Flowers. I like that. Literally giving you your flowers.
Exactly. And I was just really loved being a part of big events. And I was like, yo, I'd love to help you bring this to life. And I joined the team then, and I transitioned out of the team in 2021 was when I officially transitioned off to just make more space. I helped transition the organization to the new model. They were able to hire a managing director and then kind of exit. And that gave me a little bit of time of, rest and to make space for individuals who are eager to also contribute and join the organization. And for me, it was an active decision at that time to really focus on music. I transitioned from my full-time role at Berklee in the Career Center to a part-time faculty role in January 2020. So that transition was me making more space for me to focus on my art and performing and gigging and production and so forth. So in 2020, I left my full-time role, transitioned to teaching part-time, and kind of like did my last year working with BAMS Fest. And because of my time working in the org, I never really could apply to perform at the festival. That was always a thing that, I think it ended up being kind of it ended up being the perfect timing. And I performed with other artists as like a backing artist, which was fine as a backing musician, but this was my first time, having made that actual separation to put my name in the hat to perform, and got a chance to perform this year.
I want to go back to Berklee. You ended up, when you first got the job at Berklee, what was your occupation role?
So I moved to Berklee in May 2013 to be a residence director. There were two roles. It was either be a residence director or work in the student activities office. And
what is that, a residence director?
So a residence director is responsible for one of the residence halls or dormitories, folks used to call them. Yeah.
Were you an RA? Is that what?
No, I was the RA's boss. I was the RA's boss.
Okay. God, I was going to say.
Yep, I was the RA's boss. Hold on one second.
Okay. But for some reason, it's been a while since I've been back in the dorm. So I thought this was much more detailed role, but okay.
No, it was a boss of an RA.
Running the RAs. Okay,
yeah, I was running the RAs, and Yeah, I did that for 4 years. I worked in the residence life office for 4 years. Then I moved to be an assistant director in the career center, where I did that for about 3 years. And I was preparing students for internships, jobs, helping prepare them for interviews, specifically working with students who are interested in getting into music production, music design, sound design, in those fields. And I did that for 3 years, and then was able to make my transition to faculty, because my master's I went to Iowa State for graduate school. I got a master's in higher education and student affairs. So I particularly wanted to work with college age students. I was very involved. You thought I was involved. I was a very involved undergrad person and grad school, which is probably why I'm so involved into things now. I've just always been involved in things. So I was a part of all the groups and whatnot. And I think I realized how much I loved my college experience and how important my advisors were to my development. You know, the people that looked after me and I could go to for different problems and challenges. And I thankfully had a very good undergrad experience, and had a lot of really dope people around me. And I think I wanted to be that for other students. And I studied at a focus in classroom teaching. So I taught throughout my master's program, working with students of color for a scholarship program. And I think in the back of my head, I just really wanted to get to Berklee. I didn't realize that working at a music school was an option for me, because in graduate school, being that we're studying to be student affairs professionals, we learn about the different types of institutions: 2-year institutions, community colleges, historically Black universities, for-profit, nonprofit, et cetera. And not once did we cover arts-based institutions. So I never even knew that it was a possibility for me to be able to merge both of my loves of music and education. And I didn't want to be a music teacher. I think specifically, I didn't want to teach the instrument. I just wanted to be in the music business. And Berklee was the only job I applied to after graduate school. It was my only option. It was either that or stay in Iowa and go on tour with the Nappy Roots. And that was summer 2013. And thankfully, I had already accepted the role. And when I later found out that they weren't taking the band on the tour, so I'm like glad that I that I applied and accepted. And drove. I drove from Iowa, went home to Detroit. And thankfully, what was really cool was my mother. She never went to college, and she started her associate's program when I started graduate school. And then when I graduated, she graduated with her associate. So we got to have a joint graduation party. Got to celebrate with my mom. Yeah. So it was a really, really cool year. And that's what brought me out to Boston. And now it's been 10 years. Funny. This is my 10th year here.
It's funny you mentioned Nappy Roots, because I probably promoted that Nappy Roots tour in Boston at the Middle East.
Oh, wow.
They didn't have a band. So that makes sense. I think that was it. I don't remember what year. It had to be at least 10 years.
It was 2013. It was like the summer of 2013.
I think I did that show.
Wow.
That's I don't know if it's that exact tour, but I have done Nappy Roots a couple of times at the Middle East.
That's what's up.
I always liked the Nappy Roots. I feel like, they came out with those big hits, and then they were kind of thrown in this one-hit wonder category. Yeah. But they made great music after that.
And they toured. They were one of the hardest touring bands for the longest.
Yeah, they're great. They got songs with Kanye. Plus shows. I mean,
yeah. 250 plus shows a year on a regular. Yeah. Like they would kick, but I didn't play with them long enough for them to even probably remember me. It was just during my time in Iowa, but it was a dope experience nonetheless.
They put out an album recently that had some really good songs on it. I forget the name of it.
Check it out.
But yeah, I always check for those stuff. If they got something new, I'll always listen to it. It's a great band. So you decided recently to leave. So talk to me about academia, because I've talked to some people that say that there is a lot of issues with academia, and there's a lot of systematic stuff in there too, and it's very challenging waters to navigate. How do you?
Yeah.
What was your experience in that?
Um,
Did you have any issues with it?
Starting
I don't want to get
stemming
you in
back.
trouble with work. I don't want to
No,
get you in
no,
trouble
no,
with
not at all. I think all of
work.
that is, I think is true. Like I think it's systemic oppression and so forth is systemic. It's in everything that we do. Is in
Right.
and it's hard for me to say that I'm not a part of a system that impacts people. Like it, I just am,
Right.
and I'm a part of the system to, you know, make it better, and that there's no quick fix to it. And that's the whole nature of a system, is that it's just going to take time. It's just as organic and human as we are as people, because people are flawed. So there's harm happening within academia, within higher ed. Absolutely. um I would say that my experience with it, thankfully, I give a lot of love to my sister, to my big sis, because if it wasn't for her normalizing school for me, I don't think I would have had the excitement that I had about going to college. Her bringing me down during her summer fests and party weekends, and you know, she let me have a wine cooler here and there, nothing crazy, but I think I just like loved seeing how independent people were. I was always a bit of an independent kid, and I think that's why my parents kind of like raised me to be that way. I like went to sleepaway camp for one summer, and then I was like, yo, send me to boarding school. I want to go to boarding school. Like I was so, yeah, I wanted to, like, I got a little bit of taste of independence going to band camp for a couple of months. I was like, I want to be free. So
Right.
like I was excited to explore, and she helped make sure that I had people at Bowling Green, like my advisor. She helped me pick my advisor, my scholarship advisor, and then my career advisor. She made sure that I knew my career advisor. So by the time I ended my sophomore year, I had like a 2-page resume, because she would make me come and sit in her office and write all the things that I was involved in down, every semester, and build that. So I think I was privileged to have a lot of guides, a lot of people who had my best interests at heart. And I think because I had that experience, I was reflected upon what it means to be a really good student affairs professional, to be and to show up for my students, to be aware of what's going on in the world, to treat them like they're human beings, to listen to their needs, to be knowledgeable of the resources available to them, and so forth. So I approach my teaching with, I think, the strategies and learnings that I've obtained over the years of like, what does it mean to build a curriculum and all those types of things, with, I think, some of the both like common sense and sensitivity that is required when you're just working with people who are in vulnerable places, students who are still developing mentally, emotionally, personally, folks who are entrusting Berklee, the college, and paying thousands of dollars and
Tens of
entrusting
thousands.
exactly
Tens and
60K plus a year,
a lot of money.
60K plus a year, with their dreams,
for
with
music.
their like careers in an industry that is volatile, that is ever changing, that it is challenging at times, to grasp why am I going to the school to be this? So there's a lot of pressure being at Berklee. I call Berklee a Ivy League arts institution, because that's what it is. There is a big rigor, a deep rigor to being there. There's a lot expected of Berklee students. Berklee has a major reputation globally. We have multiple global partners, and partners around the U.S. Our alumni base is insane. The number of individuals who are in the music and in entertainment industry that are connected to Berklee is vast. So it's a major institution. There's a lot of pressure that students are put under. They put themselves under.
How about you?
And I do
You
my
get pressure?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The pressure for me is interesting because it's like there are students who are coming in here who are absolutely more talented than I am and know different things about the music industry than I do. So trying to make sure that I'm relevant to them, trying to make sure that what I'm offering to them, they are actually interested in. Because I feel like that is my responsibility as an educator. It isn't, it isn't this like uppity, proud, like I'm a professor. It's like, no, like, yo, you're paying me to be in front of you. Like, I want to make sure that you're leaving this classroom, feeling like I care about you, like I give a shit. One,
Right.
and that you're getting the course description out of, like, you read this course description and you said like, yo, I want to spend my time doing this course. So I want to make sure that you're receiving what is described in what we're offering to you. So that's definitely the pressure and responsibility I put on myself.
And a lot of people don't finish at Berklee. I met more people that don't that start, but they don't necessarily graduate. Why do you think that is?
Oh, it's a different area. I think I'd also ask, like, how old are those people? Like, where do they fit generationally?
Yeah, probably, I would say probably generation X and Z.
Yeah, because, we were founded in 1946, 46, 45, 46 45. And the earlier years of Berklee, the music industry was also different. A lot of folks would come here and shed, get better, get picked up and go tour, get picked up and go off with so-and-so, get picked up and do these things. Over the years, that's, I think shifted. I think individuals have also not finished because of financial hardship and the cost of Berklee just continuing to increase and increase. Right. Individuals have, I think, consistently gone to Berklee and then got the opportunity to go or felt like they've gotten what they needed out of it. And you still have that. I think the interesting thing and the cool thing about Berklee is that it's set up to where if you were to take a semester off and go on tour, you can come back and pick back up where you left off, or you can leave early and do Berklee online and do coursework remotely, or you can go to a what they call it, a satellite institution, get some of your credits out the way, and then come to this campus, or go to the Valencia, Spain campus, or whatnot. So over the years, I think the Berklee network has expanded to allow different individuals at varying stages of life still be able to have access to the institution itself.
You brought up a good point. You brought up guide. You know what I mean? Guide. I never really looked at it that way. You think about musicians. The musician really need to go to school to learn his trade, like to learn to play. Normally, back in the day, if you were up and coming artist, you go work with a more experienced musician, and that's how you learned the business, right? You learned how to play, and you got good that way. But I never really thought about it as your guide. Like, you go to Berklee for guides, people that can kind of put you connections and put you on the right track. And you hopefully you get enough of those, because I listened to your story and I was like, his success is he had so many guides in his life, right? Like, I was just thinking, like, you had all these good people in all these different positions that helped you along the way. Berklee should be that, right? Berklee should be professors and connections that can help you anyway. So I guess that answers my question of, like, why maybe you should go to school for music. Not so much the playing, even though the playing is important, but to meet people to help you put you on the right path.
Right. And I don't subscribe to the idea that you have to go to school for music to be a good musician. There's plenty of real life examples of people out there who are quite successful without in our industry without a degree. I think that going to college is about the experience for sure. Right. That is what ultimately you're paying for and getting, is being on the physical campus. It's being in the classroom with Tia Fuller, who used to be a saxophonist, a horn player for Beyonce, or Taylor Lynn Carrington, who's multi Grammy Award winning percussionist and educator. Daedalus, who's an incredibly world renowned
He teaches
EDM and
there?
electronic. Yeah, Daedalus teaches at Berklee and so forth.
Dope.
Like, you're paying for the experience of having access to the physical space, to interacting with people. I mean, the individuals that have graduated and come out of Berklee, are people's, your classmates or your peers. The layers in which, like, the relationships that you have access to because of Berklee, as well as the cachet. When you say the name Berklee, people's ears perk up a little bit. It's like saying Harvard. It's like saying Yale. It's like exactly.
It's a well-known brand. It's a good brand,
right? And again, it's not without its flaws. And I think that there is also a lot of individuals who, a lot of alum who did not like their experience at Berklee, who don't subscribe to some of the hype as well, and they didn't have good experiences there. And I think that kind of alludes back to, the idea of, like, me being at in a system, being a part of a system that does and has impacted individuals, because there's also individuals who go to college and don't have a good experience, and that has a negative impact for them as well. And my goal is to try to, like, balance that out, because I can't be responsible for other people. I can only be a conduit for, like, me doing a good job and hopefully bringing that energy into the room of my colleagues and helping to amplify and uplift their spirits and their energy and contribute in a way that, like, makes us all look good.
I like that. That's a good mentality. Real brief on my college experience. I went to Northeastern for music business between 2001 and 2004. Music industry was crashing as we were speaking. I think, you know what I mean? Like, digital downloading was all the label stuff was going out the window. So what they were teaching was literally dying by the day. You know what I mean? So it was really, there was no jobs. You know what I mean? There was no job. The best thing I could get was an internship at a guerrilla marketing company, which is great. I got so much out of that, but it was just the times, but I always tell people, going to college there put me in the city, put me in the music scene, made me have connections. I did get that out of it. You know what I mean? Did they place me in a job? No, but it was on me but they did the best they could with it, but it was kind of on me as an entrepreneur to kind of figure it out.
Right. And the interesting thing is that, like, that's regardless. Like, even if you didn't go to college, it's on you still to figure out how you gonna get that job, how you go pay the bills. Like, my dad gave me my options. He was like, once you turn 18, either you're in school or you're working. Like, and you can live here. I'll help pay bills if you're in school. If you're working, then you're gonna have to learn how to pay some bills a little bit too. And that was the structure that I got. And I knew that I always had a safety net. Not a lot of people, have the safety nets, for it to work out. But yeah, everybody's experience is their own for sure. Thankfully, I loved my experience.
You have a good one, and I'm glad you're sharing it with people in the classroom too, because that's important. Sharing our experiences, that's what really helps. We can't really speak for other people, but if we speak for ourselves and what has worked for us, what people choose to do with that information, is a beautiful thing. That's community in my period. I also want to go back not back, but I want to talk before we leave about, you put out some music, Trust the Process EP. Talk about that real quick, because we haven't really talked about that enough.
For sure. Trust the Process came out of a bit of the pandemic. It the album and the name Trust the Process stems back to one of my former professors. I was as a staff member, you can take classes at Berklee, one class per semester for free. So I was taking a poetry slam class with Caroline Harvey, who is also a Def Poetry Jam artist, and they are incredible. They saw me at a really challenging time, and placed a rock on my desk, and that rock had Trust the Process painted on it. And for some reason, I just felt this weight lift off of me. It ended up being, I think, just like something that I needed at that moment. And that was the extra courage I needed to write my own book of poems. And connecting back to my thoughts on entering poetry, not from a literary perspective or reading a lot of works, I think part of it was I was scared and intimidated by it. And that ended up being a call to action for myself to say, like, trust the process, learn how to write for the page, learn how to really engage in poetry, not from only a performative perspective. So it was a way for me just kind of challenging, learning about different forms of poetry, and so forth, was also why I was taking the course. And over 2 years, I essentially used a collection of my journal entries and made a book of poems titled Trust the Process, which stemmed from one single poem. So it went from this rock to a poem to a book of poems, and that got released in, I think, 2017. Years later, 2021, I released Trust the Process, the EP. And it just ended up, I think, being the right thing to do, because a lot of the poems, some of the poems that I wrote, I wrote them for the page, and I hadn't really fused my poetry and music in this next elevated way, which used more instrumentation. I do my very first album or EP is Colors of My Soul, which is an EP I put out with Hipstery, and that is just spoken word and beats. So a lot of people knew me about my saxophone, but they didn't really know about my poetry. So I wanted to do that EP as just like me, my beat and my production. They didn't know that I produced music. So I just want to put out some beats, do some poems on top of it. And I had no saxophone on that project. I then dropped also the book of poems along with Colors of My Soul the same year. Years later, I perform this show in 2019, December, and 2020 comes around, pandemic starts, and I'm like, crap, like I don't I wanted to make an album. I wanted to get in the studio, put something out, and like I don't really want to get into the studio with anyone. And I was able to get the audio files from the engineer who was running that show, and I was able to turn those files, that live show, those 3 songs, into Trust the Process, the EP. Worked with Dan Cantor and Notable Productions and Alex Allenson over at The Bridge to get that. And that's Chris Hamblin on piano and Daniel Moreno on drums. And now I'm working on my follow-up project called Prophecy. My Now Was Predicted.
And another spoken word project, but it will have some instrumentation behind it.
Yeah, so this one will fuse everything. So this is going to have production, live instrumentation, me on my sax, poems, lyricists, vocalists. It is Prophecy, My Now Was Predicted, represents me exploring the colors of my soul, me learning how to trust my own process, and Prophecy is me stepping into who I've always meant to be, which is a performer and artist, somebody who uses my gifts to shine light on real things, to invite them into their own creative practice and healing, to have fun. So Prophecy is kind of like this stepping into myself and really owning the things that I've been doing.
Amazing. Love it. There's one thing you wrote in. I just want to close it out with this. You were recognized by WBUR as one of 25 millennials of color, impactfully. What was the word? It calls it. I'm sorry. Recognized by WBUR as one of 25 millennials of color impacting the arts and culture in Boston. What do you say to someone who wants to get involved in that? What would you recommend to somebody who wants to be a part of this scene, doesn't have a lot of connections, and wants to get involved for the cause?
I'd say, start to do some research on the different things that are going on. You have the BostonCalendar.com. You have BAMS Fest. You have Boston While Black. You got Hipstery. You got the varying music venues. Really start to research and find the different things that you're into. I ask people. I ask, do you all, random folks, do you all know about venues with live music? Where's live music at? Where are the poetry at? Where is the visual art or the painters? Like, I would just ask folks, and people share it with me. Yo, go to this venue, do this, check out that, because there are plenty of opportunities. Go to the City of Boston Arts and Culture department's page on boston.gov, because they are sharing all kinds of events. You have the multicultural, the MCC, why am I blanking on the title of the MCC? My bad, MCC, my bad. You got the Boston Foundation, you got the New England Foundation for the Arts, you got Company One, you got the American Repertory Theater, you got, like, there's so much. There really is. And it's putting yourself out there to asking folks what they get into. I feel like that's a very, I think, accessible way of figuring out what's going on, doing some searches, and tapping in. On Instagram, on Facebook, there's people posting about events that happen on a weekly basis. I use the BostonCalendar.com for all of my date nights and try to figure out what's going on over the weekend. 100 free things to do in Boston. There's so much out there.
Wow, I didn't even realize all that. I just got a bunch of information. Back in the day before social media, you just showed up at a show. That's all you really could do back
there we
then.
go. Great Scott. You just be like, yo, who's playing?
Well, who's playing tonight? Let's go. What's going on in the Middle East? But
yeah.
Hey, Tim, thanks for your time. I know you're a busy guy.
Thank you, Leedz. I really appreciate you having me on here.
Yeah, and thanks for everything you've done for the community, man. It's been great to see you play a part, and everything you've been a part of, and it's growing. I mean, from someone who's been living in Boston area for 20 years, I've seen a lot of growth, and I know you played a role in that. So thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Right. Thank everybody for tuning into the Leedz Edutainment podcast with very special guest Tim Hall. Check out some of our other interviews, and yeah, see you around, brother.
Peace.
Take care.